Let's talk about my 2025 predictions for makeup releases and trends when it comes to beauty. I haven't done this video in a few years. I do have a lot of thoughts going into 2025, and I did watch Kelly Gooch's predictions and her analysis of her 2024 predictions, and which were accurate. And I do definitely agree with her 2025 predictions, but I have some of my own, and I'm going to be kind of speaking generally, not necessarily just specifically indie, because indie brands are kind of in a lane of their own. They don't necessarily really follow trends, but I do think some of these might cross over there as well. So these are not really in any particular order. I just kind of went and dumped what was in my brain into my notes. I do have some specific predictions for some brands, like product specific predictions. So just a general one jumping into it. I think that we're going to see a resurgence of eyeshadow sticks in general. I've already been seeing that being a little bit more common, like Moira Cosmetics, for example, Freck Beauty, and of course some of the more high-end brands like Victoria Beckham and Bobbi Brown have already had them. But I feel like we're going to see the easy to use eyeshadow still going into 2025, but not necessarily in a clean girl makeup way. I think there's going to be some room for some more kind of adventurous, colorful shades, but I do think it's going to be marketed as being very easy to use. And I do see this mostly being for more mainstream brands. The Moira is not a mainstream brand per se. It is definitely a little bit more kind of like a drugstore brand that is not mainstream. They don't sell on Ulta or Sephora, which would be actually amazing if they sold on Ulta. I think they would do really, really great in that space. And then my next prediction is I think that there's going to be so many topper shadows, like single shadows in compacts, not like single shadows like any brands where you have to buy your own empty magnetic palette. I think we're going to see a lot of single eyeshadow topper like shades. Again, easy to use, very sparkly though, so not necessarily like super soft. It's really, you want to be noticed, but you want to be noticed for the sparkle on your eyelid. So very similar to the Urban Decay Muda shadows. Elf Cosmetics already launched kind of something similar to that, and Moira did as well. I think we're going to see a lot more of that going into 2025 for sure. Obviously, indie brands have been doing this kind of thing, especially in 2024. There's been so many beautiful one and done shadows. However, I think for the mainstream consumer, people don't want just single eyeshadow metal pans floating around. They want like a nice little compact. And while some indie brands do have empty compacts that you can buy the singles in, it's just not the same. Usually those compacts are not really, like, first of all, the brands are not very recognizable, and I think that does matter to the mainstream consumer. Can they buy it at Sephora or Ulta? And now the two-faced, almost like diamond faceted packaging of those single shadows, which by the way, I have those, and I'm going to be eye swatching those hopefully by the end of this year. I'm very excited to show you those because those are so pricey. But the thing is, I think people are not going to mind too much. I think there's going to be obviously a line. I think the Patrick Ta duos were just too much. I think also people weren't really a huge fan of the fact that it was a duo. That being said, I think we might see some duos. I do see that happening, but I think for the most part it's going to be like single compacts. On that note, I think Urban Decay is going to be relaunching or also launching new naked palettes. I think they're going to for sure capitalize off of the success of the re-release of that OG naked palette, and they're either going to continue to relaunch the previous naked palettes, or I think we're gonna see more newer palettes. And they did try that a few years ago. There was that, like, I can't remember, it was not Cyborg, it was something kind of futuristic, and it looked like not good. And then they did that Wild West one, and I just think maybe that time wasn't the right time for those to launch. But I think given the consumer now, I think now is the time to do it. So I think we're going to see that. Whether or not they're the same thing or completely new concepts, I'm not 100% sure. I could lean either way. Let me know what your thoughts are on that prediction. I also think we're going to see a huge amount of jelly products like the Milk Makeup Lip and Cheek Sticks that they launched. I've already seen other brands doing those. I believe Glam launched their own version of that. There's also a brand that I purchased from Yes Style. I think it was called Gigi Bear or something like that. They already launched. It looks pretty much the same thing. I think we're going to see a lot of different jelly-like things because it did so well for Milk Makeup. Whether or not people liked it doesn't matter. It was for sure something that was very intriguing to a lot of people. I've seen people pretend biting it, digging their nails into it, and you name it, and I think it's very intriguing and it has that shock value. I for sure think e.l.f. is going to come out with that, but their own. Really curious to see like what the packaging is gonna look like of that though, because I don't see them necessarily wanting to use the same exact packaging shape. I think they might kind of change it a little bit, but who knows? I mean, they're obviously doing dupes of other brands' viral products at this point anyway. And I also think jelly wise, we're gonna see something more like the Huda Beauty kind of little compact, the mica spheres in it. I don't think we're necessarily going to see like specifically petri dish kind of things. I think maybe some from some brands, some like drugstore brands, but I'm just thinking like that's another kind of jelly product almost that is in a compact but kind of along the same lines. So I could foresee actually seeing, now really thinking about it, round flat compacts but that have the same level of like slight stain, slight just a very hint of color, like the Milk makeup sticks, if you kind of know what I'm thinking and what I'm imagining in my mind. I also think Natasha Denona will be releasing glowy blushes in the same formula or finish as that highlighter that she launched this year. I for sure think so. I think a lot of people enjoy that formulation, and I definitely think that is something that I could see her want to do because so many people liked it. Again, if something is successful for a brand, they're going to want to recreate that again. So I don't know if they would necessarily launch bronzers. Maybe. I would definitely think they wouldn't be really necessarily too glowy, like in a sense of having kind of mica in there to make it a little bit more glowy, but maybe glowy in like a wet kind of way. Also in 2024, we've seen quite the resurgence of baked products. So baked blushes, baked highlighters. I think we're going to see even more of that, especially like going into spring and summer. I think there's going to be a lot of different brands launching like baked kind of face products, potentially even eyeshadows as well. I could see that becoming like something a little bit more popularized. I personally loved baked formulas for the cheeks. I think it's one of the most easier kinds of formulations usually for most brands. I really love using them. I think they're super easy to use and I think they look very beautiful on the skin, very flattering, and I think we're going to see that a lot in 2025, but I'm not sure how long that will necessarily stick around. Another brand specific prediction, I think ABH is going to for sure, I'm like 98% sure is going to be launching single eyeshadows. I think they're going to do some more of the 9-pan palettes. I think those have been doing really well for them. I would be very shocked to see them do the longer square pan. I think they were like 12-pan palettes. They've definitely amped up their shimmers a bit to kind of stay on trend, and I do see them wanting to replicate that in a single compact kind of form, and I know they're going to make the compacts really beautiful. I just feel like given the trend of like what they've been releasing over the past few years, I definitely see that this would be very much on trend for them to want to release something like that. I think they see the popularity of it. I think they see people are reacting to their shimmer shadows in the especially new 9-pan eyeshadow palettes, and I think they're gonna want to put those into compacts, and I do think they're going to be really nice. Are they going to necessarily fully rival the Urban Decay Muda shadows? No, I think they're going to be kind of their own thing, but kind of similar effect, similar vibe. As for lips, I think we're going to see more lip stain types of products. We're going to see more formulas that are super thin on the lips. They're kind of matte looking, but they're not matte in like a thick liquid lipstick formula when you swipe it on and it accentuates the wrinkles in your lips. I think we're going to see something that's very feathered and matte but very lightweight. I feel like we've already been seeing that. I think C Beauty and K Beauty brands have already had their finger on the pulse of that. I think Makeup by Mario is going to launch some cream highlighters, whether they will be in a stick form or that like compact form that they did the bronzers with. I'm not 100% sure, but I do feel like that's something that's missing for them. They do have powder highlighter and they also do have that like sparkly topper like shade, but I think that they're missing a really beautiful, more like natural glow cream type of highlighter from their product lineup. So I definitely think that that would be very on trend for them and the type of releases that they've had up until now. I think pH changing products are going to still be launching, but not at the rate as they have been launching. I think at this point it's been done over and over, and I think people have figured out that at this point they all look the same the way that they change on your lips. There is always that just like specific look that you will have, of course depending on your skin tone, of the pH changing products, whether they're for the lips or for the cheeks, unless there will be a breaking new pH balancing formulation that will change into a different shade, which I'm not really sure if that's possible. I could see that being something in the way future, but I don't know if 2025 is the year for that. But we'll be interested to see if there's any way to do the pH adjusting, but so it does change to a different color than that kind of like cooler toned pink for the most part from what I've seen. I think Fenty Beauty will either be launching more limited edition or maybe a permanent line of those limited edition shades that they launched last year. I think it was during the summer. These ones right here, I personally wasn't like the biggest fan of the formulation. I think that those really took off. And again, I just think the brand is going to want to replicate that hype. I think they saw people really interested in it. I almost sometimes feel like some of the brands have been launching some smaller, more unique products to kind of test the market and see how people respond, to help them decide if they want that launch to be a bigger launch that's a permanent lineup to their product range. So I do think we're going to see more blushes. Either they're going to be more limited edition shades, and I would not be surprised if we see some shades that are very mocha mousse, potentially maybe bronzers, like glowy bronzers that are in this compact. And I think the outside of the packaging will look different, but I'm wondering if they will want to add this to their permanent lineup or not. I also think Rhode Beauty will be launching bronzers for the summertime, and they will be in the same, probably in the same compact as their blushes. I forget what they're called. I'm going to be putting them up on the screen. I would be surprised if they changed the outside component of something that is a stick form like the blushes. So that's why I think it's going to look pretty much more of the same. As for collaborations between companies, I do think we're going to see that becoming such a normal thing. I think it's going to become the new standard. The way, for example, that Barbie collab a bunch of different brands leading up to the movie, during the movie, after the movie, months after the movie. I think we're going to see that, especially going into 2025 and going into way future. I think it's going to be a lot of things like that. I think it's become heavily ingrained in marketing strategy for a lot of different brands. I saw Nosferatu did a perfume leading up to the movie. I would be surprised if we don't see some sort of a makeup collection coming down the line. Maybe not like within the next couple of weeks as I'm filming this, like going into the end of December, but I do think there's going to be some sort of a brand makeup collection with Nosferatu. And then another prominent collab was, of course, Wicked with Rem Beauty, obviously partially because Ariana Grande was in the movie, but that was also leading up to the movie. And I think that just, it really brings the hype and it really brings your attention to the movie. Whether you like that or not, I think it's extremely successful in getting people to want to go see the movies. There's been other movies that have done that during 2024. There's of course been other collaborations such as Avatar and Lethal Cosmetics. There's also, I think, at least 2 collaborations that Bratz did with 2 different brands, and the collections looked actually pretty different. Home Alone did a collaboration with NYX Cosmetics, Pokemon, and Colourpop. I think we're gonna see a part 2 of Twilight and Colourpop in 2024 for sure. I mean, that palette sold out. A bunch of those things sold out. People were so excited. I 100% think that they're going to act on that and they're going to do another collection. And I think that collection is going to have a red eyeshadow in the palette. I'm just saying. And then my last prediction is not really like a really polished prediction. It's more of a pretty vague prediction, and I think that Pat McGrath is going to pivot. I don't know quite to what, but I do think there's been things going on behind the scenes, and I think that they're going to switch it up a little bit. I'm not sure if they would do a full-on rebrand necessarily, but I do think that there's going to be a change a little bit to the aesthetic and the kind of products that they release. Part of the reason I think this is because they haven't been doing their mothership palettes. Last year they had so many sales, like constantly they had sales. This year, not as much. I feel like overall they've been a little bit quiet. I do see them doing collaborations for sure in 2025, but I don't foresee any more mothership palettes, and I do think their holiday launch next year is going to be different from what it's been these upcoming years. I could definitely see them doing kind of smaller pans. They did launch eyeshadow duos this year for holiday, and they had pretty mixed reviews. So I think they've been putting some products out there that are limited edition purposefully because they're trying to get a vibe check on how people are responding to things. So for example, last year we saw them launch eyeshadows in jars. I did do eye swatches of all of those shades and they were nice, but honestly those were on sale pretty quickly after, and they have since launched I think a couple more shades, or they did launch those even prior to, and I just don't think that they really took off the way that they might have maybe thought that they would. Maybe it's just not time for those eyeshadows in the jars to come back yet, but I do think that maybe one day, not quite yet, not quite in 2025, we will see a resurgence of the eyeshadows in jars like that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your predictions. What do you think of my predictions? Do you disagree? What do you think Pat McGrath has cooking? And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.